Asperger's syndrome. What is Asperger's syndrome? This syndrome was named after Hans Asperger. In 1944, he studied children who lacked in nonverbal communication, empathy, and were rather clumsy. It's an high-functioning autistic spectrum disorder characterized by difficulties in nonverbal communication and social interaction, as well as restrictive and repetitive behaviors or interests. It is diagnosed in about 1 in every 10,000 children and more commonly affects boys than girls. The exact cause of Asperger's syndrome is unknown. It has been suggested that it is a genetic cause, though a true genetic cause has never been found, and brain imaging techniques have shown no differences, but that it tends to run in families. There isn't a cure for it, and most treatments rely simply on improving the person's communication and social skills, and in many cases, especially with children, behavioral therapy. Signs and symptoms: the inability to read body language or understand facial expressions, disliking change in routine and being very comfortable doing the same thing day after day, appearing to lack empathy, being unable to understand changes in voice inflection, examples pitch, tone, and accentuations, often a formal style of speaking for their age, avoids eye contact with others, has unusual facial expressions or weird postures, preoccupation with one or few interests which may be extremely knowledgeable about, talk a lot, generally about a favorite subject, one-sided conversations are often common, poor handwriting and sometimes delayed motor development, though many Aspies have normal developmental milestones, heightened sensitivity and overstimulation to loud noises, lights, tastes, or textures. The spectrum is very different between individuals and there is no same case. Other conditions that often affect those with Asperger's: attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety disorder, depression, which is most common in adolescence, nonverbal learning disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, social anxiety disorder, maladaptive daydream disorder, and fantasy-prone personality disorder. And just how wide is the Asperger's spectrum? Here are 2 examples: Daniel Tammet and John Robertson. Daniel Tammet is an autistic savant with Asperger's syndrome. He is a very unusual case because he can communicate. He says that in his head, every positive integer up to 10,000 has its own texture, color, and feel, which is also known as synesthesia. He has memorized and recited 22,514 digits of pi, which is currently the world record. He has learned 10 languages, one of which is Icelandic, and he taught it to himself in 1 week. He also suffers from OCD. One compulsion is that he can only have 45 grams of porridge for breakfast. He cannot leave the house without counting the number of clothing items he is wearing. And he is also creating his own language because he feels it is the only way he can truly express himself. John Robertson, he is far more, quote, normal than Daniel Tammet. He has a son that he calls Cubby. He did not discover that he had Asperger's syndrome until much later in life, in his 40s. He dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, and his Asperger's gave him a rare insight into electronics, which later, because of his interest, he designed special effects guitars for Kiss in the 1970s. He is now a speaker and advocate to educate about Asperger's syndrome, and there is a link to his Facebook page. And here are all the sources. The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. For the first part of this, you'll need to turn this in class, but describe 5 things you expect to find in scary stories. For part 2, read the following statements and decide whether you agree or disagree. Vocabulary for this lesson: acute, foresight, profound, sagacity, vehemently, audacity, mockery, raved, stifled, vex, derision, premises, refrained, unperceived, and waned. The definitions: acute means sharp or keen, such as a sense of hearing. Audacity is a presumption or bold courage. Derision is the contempt of ridicule. Foresight is a looking forward to future or what will happen. Mockery is a person or thing receiving or deserving ridicule. Premises is a piece of real estate, house, or building and its land. Profound is marked by intellectual depth. Raved is to talk wildly with excessive enthusiasm. Refrained is to be held back or kept from doing. Sagacity is a keen perception or intelligence or sound judgment. Stifled is to suppress or hold back. Unperceived is not seen or understood. Vehemently is acting with great force, violently or forcefully. Vex is to disturb or annoy or to terrify. And waned is to become less intense or fading. Edgar Allan Poe virtually created the detective story and perfected the psychological thriller. He ran up gambling in debt and could not finish school, and he went into the army, which broke off his engagement, and he wrote short stories and poetry. Literary terms: characterization, the author's expression of the character's personality, actions, or thoughts. Conflict is the struggle. It can be character against self, character against society, character against nature, or character against God or a higher being. Dialogue is vocal exchange between characters. Imagery is the collection of words that evoke atmosphere, mood, and tension. Point of view is the view from which the author presents the action. Third person omniscient is all-knowing, so we know what all the characters are thinking. Third person limited is limited to the views of one character, which is he or she. And first person is the voice and thoughts of one character, which is I. A symbol is something which itself as yet also stands for or means something else. Tone suggests an attitude toward the subject which is communicated by the words the author chooses, i.e. playful, somber, serious, casual, formal, or ironic. Some questions. Describe how the character is telling the story. How does the first sentence create suspense? Find and write a sentence for time going slowly and one for time going fast. Why do you believe he mentions time so much, and why does he change the pace from slow to fast? Write down one example of repetition from the words from the story, i.e. very, very slowly. List some of the evil words that he uses. What effect do these words have on you, the reader? How does he make the evil eye sound disgusting? What words does he use? How does he make the death of the man sound disgusting? And the story is written in first-person narrative by the main character. List a quotation where the main character directly refers to the reader, you. Why does he do this? Why does Poe have the murderer tell the story? And in your own words, explain why the story gripped your imagination. Writing assignment, retell the story from a point of view of another character, the old man, one of the officers, or the next-door neighbor.